If you and your students are working on college applications or if you're looking into financial aid, you may have seen two common terms show up: FAFSA and CSS Profile. Now, most families are more familiar with FAFSA, but you might be wondering, I don't know, do we need to do both of these, just one of these? And so in today's video, I want to break down the differences between FAFSA and CSS Profile. And I also want to explain if you and your student need to submit one or both of them. I will let you know that the answer is never neither of them, okay? Now make sure you hit subscribe because every week I have a new strategy for you and your family to work towards that debt-free degree. Hey there, my name is Jocelyn Pearson, founder of the Scholarship System, where we help families overwhelmed with the cost of college secure scholarships so their student can graduate without student debt. Now our main weapon is scholarships. We've helped families secure over $15 million to date, and we're not stopping there. But there are strategies even beyond that. So today's is about tapping into financial aid through the government and through the universities. Now, just a quick note, this is for US citizens and permanent residents. We are not familiar with how this goes for international students. Let's dive in. So first and foremost, what is FAFSA? So FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and this is a free application. You should never have to pay for it, and it's a government-based form that families submit in order to access funds. It is required at most institutions, especially institutions that offer any kind of federal aid, but a lot of institutions rely on this form even to award their own funding. Now, as far as federal aid, this form helps you tap into potentially grants like Pell Grants, which do not have to be paid back, work-study programs where your student can actually have a on-campus job and receive college funding for their hours that they worked. And then of course, this is also how families can tap into student loans, federal student loans, which typically do have the best terms, and your student can borrow them without you co-signing on some of them. So they are usually more favorable than going elsewhere first. Now again, this FAFSA is free to complete and it opens up typically October 1st every year. That was a little wonky for a few years, but I think we're finally there where we're consistently back to opening October 1st. And your family will actually fill this out every single year, beginning your student's senior year in high school. So that first fall semester, their senior year, is the first time you'll do it, but then every fall thereafter until they graduate from college. Now, if you feel like the results from FAFSA are inaccurate, or if your situation is very different from the numbers that they asked for, there is a possibility to appeal FAFSA results. And so actually, if you click on this video here, you can watch my video, How to Write a Financial Appeal Letter. We will also link to it in the description along with any other free resources I mentioned. I also want to say that every family should be doing scholarships in addition to FAFSA. So we want to make sure that we're tapping into all of the debt-free money. So FAFSA is kind of our first step where we can tap into government-based money and through the universities, but we can always be applying for money outside of the university, even before senior year. So you and your student can attend our free webinar where I teach you how to find those legitimate scholarships with less competition. You just go to thescholarshipsystem.com/free webinar, or you can click on this video here. It'll explain a little bit more, or you can find the link in the description. Okay, let's jump into CSS Profile now. So CSS Profile is a separate financial aid application created by College Board. That's who does SAT, ACT. It's used by many colleges and universities to determine institutional aid. That is money given by the school itself, so grants, scholarships, other financial assistance from the university versus those federal types of money that I mentioned before. Some of the key differences here are that the CSS Profile is more detailed, or some people might say a little bit more intrusive. They ask a lot more questions. They want to know things like home equity, retirement savings, even expenses like medical bills or private school tuition if your family is paying that. Secondly, the CSS Profile is not free. So in order to submit it, it's currently around $25 for the first school, $16 for each additional school. So it is a service. Now, if your family makes under $100,000, however, it is currently free for domestic families that are in that financial range. But if your family makes more than $100,000, then you will need to pay that fee. Now, generally, this is required by private colleges, especially Ivy League schools, and selective private institutions. But some public schools do require this as well. In fact, about 400 institutions require CSS Profile. This includes universities, technical schools, small liberal arts schools, again, Ivy Leagues, so it varies. So we always want to make sure that we are aware of which one are the universities that your students interested in attending require. No matter what, we have to do FAFSA. But the question is, do we also have to do CSS Profile? So now, like FAFSA, CSS Profile opens up October 1st generally, but it is a more comprehensive look. So it'll probably take a little longer. And they certainly look at factors that are not looked at through FAFSA. So when do we need to submit both? First and foremost, if all of your students' schools only require FAFSA, we do not need to do CSS Profile. We only need to do CSS Profile if our student is applying to a school that requires it. But we always want to do FAFSA, okay? So in order to find this out, we want to check our school's financial aid office, visit their financial aid website, look at the list of required documents, and see if CSS Profile is listed there. And if so, then it is required. We also want to make sure that if we're applying to multiple schools, we want to look at each deadline. So sometimes the financial aid forms deadlines will be different than the admissions applications deadlines. And that even can be different from a scholarship application deadline. Some schools require a separate application for the scholarship money as well. So don't think that applying to a university and institution, okay, we submit that one form and we're done. We're considered for all the money, we're good to go. That is not the case. If admissions applications, scholarship applications, even through the institution, and FAFSA, federal aid application, always, and then possibly, depending on the schools that your student's applying to, CSS Profile. So we could possibly have 4 different forms that we need to go through just to cover the basics of getting our student into a university and getting them the basics of funding. This is not even considering private scholarships, which that free webinar talks about. That's where I got 6 figures, and it was how I covered the bill. So that is a huge opportunity. And again, you can learn more at thescholarshipsystem.com/free webinar. I also cover more about these different types of funding. But that said, we want to make sure we're doing all of these different forms. Now, one other reason that we want to make sure that we are submitting FAFSA for sure is that actually some scholarships will require this form. They will ask for FAFSA results in order to decipher your student's eligibility. Or some of them might say financial need needed, SAI, or the previous term was EFC, expected family contribution, must be X or less. So sometimes they'll actually make a part of criteria based on the results from FAFSA. So they don't necessarily require the FAFSA, but you have to show, yeah, our SAI came back less than that, so we're eligible to apply. Just some quick tips to make sure that we do these correctly and maximize them, no matter which form. First is to file early, as close to that October 1st date as we can. Within the first month or 2 is fine. We don't want to wait much longer than that. So really by November, if you can have these forms done, then you'll be really well taken care of, you and your student. Second is to stay organized. So creating a list of the schools that your student's applying to and double checking that they're listed on the form so that the information is sent to them. And third, with that, making sure that you have any kind of documentation needed. So gathering tax returns, W-2s, bank statements, balances, other financial documents that will be needed to answer these questions will make your life a lot easier for these forms. Fourth is to check for errors. So errors can hang up processing, which means it can delay a financial aid package. It could result in a false result. So maybe your student will miss out on money because a number is mistyped. So we want to make sure we're double checking, triple checking for errors. And lastly, and most importantly, do not miss the deadline. Each school can have a different deadline for these forms. We want to make sure that we have that on our calendar, have 18 alarms, whatever we need to do. I met a student that missed out on $17,000 per school year because he missed the deadline for submitting FAFSA. They used it to determine institutional aid as well. And had he submitted it, he would have gotten almost $80,000 over the 4 years. And they did not make an exception. No matter how many times he emailed saying, I'm sorry, can I submit it now? They did not make an exception. So that's something to note. Now, comment below, is your student required to do CSS profile, or is your family working on it? I'd love to know how many of you are facing this. And was the video helpful? If so, give me a thumbs up. Make sure you hit subscribe again, because every week we have a new strategy for you. But that said, FAFSA CSS Profile, it is critical that we are doing these if the universities require them. Okay, do not miss this requirement if your student, if it's required at your student's school, because it can potentially lead to thousands of dollars every single year while they're there. That means hundreds of dollars off of their student loan bills if they end up having to borrow money, which hopefully they won't, because you're here following our tips. All right, again, make sure you hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.